Hi. Today, two episodes that really reminded me of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, a movie I haven't seen in too long. And I have it on DVD, got it full screen on DVD. Uh, One day I'll get it widescreen. But goes to seed and gets ants in its pants. The Magic School Bus episodes featuring giant bees, which is to say, the bees are the size they are supposed to be, uh, but the kids are shrunk, and giant ants, which is to say the ants are the size they're supposed to be, but the kids are shrunk, which is exactly as it is in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Um, Except in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, it's live action, and the ant, at least, is a practical puppet giant ant. I don't know. I think there's, I think there's bee activity in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but I don't think it's a giant practical puppet. Or maybe it's only part of it. I don't know. This is not about that, but that's just such a great movie. So Goes to Seed is an interesting one. Neither of these are the, uh, you know, like I've said, the ones that really impacted me. They're just fun. Well, the first one, the Goes to Seed, is fun. Gets ants in its pants. I will mention the ant adventure that I prefer, other than Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, when I get to that. But Goes to Seed, first of all, features the guest star voice talent of uh, Robbie Benson, who is perhaps best known as the voice of the Beast in Beauty and the Beast. And you can kind of hear it if you're only thinking about the Beast's voice after he transforms back into a human. Although I said to the malevolent supernatural force I lived with when we were watching it, and she's a real fan of the movie, that it kind of reminded me of in his gentler moments, or when he's singing, but specifically when he says of the library in his castle, he says to Belle, "Then it's yours," and that reminded me of the voice in this episode of Phoebe's apparently favorite teacher from her old school. So this is an episode of the gist is that the class, which has a magic school bus and goes on great adventures, is obsessed with getting on the cover of a gardening magazine called Plant It. And Carlos, once again, Carlos is often the mover and the shaker in these episodes. He's the one saying, "Look, we got to get this. We got to get it on time." He'd be a great stage manager. Um, but he's in this case the one saying, "Got to get everything perfect. The photographer's going to be here. We got to be ready. We have to look good, etc." But they're missing a plant for the garden, and the plant is a plant that it's not a specific plant. It resembles. It looked to me kind of like it was supposed to be an orchid with maybe a little bit of tulip in there. But it's a plant that was made up for the episode, and it's a plant that Phoebe grew apparently in the garden at her old school, and she wrote to her teacher to try to get him to bring the plant to her new school to be part of the garden. And this, instead of a phone call, if she had asked Ms. Frizzle, and whose first name might be Valerie, I guess. This is, I think, the first time we hear her first name from the mouth of Archibald Seedplot when they meet and it is revealed they know each other. So if she had asked Ms. Frizzle could have gone directly to him and taken care of it. But she doesn't because she is a little embarrassed by the eccentricity of her new school and her new teacher. And she doesn't want her old school, her teacher, to see it, to see her, to find out how crazy things are. So she still could have used the phone. But again, it's one of those things where there's no episode if she doesn't do the more cumbersome thing, and she does the more easy thing. So they, of course, set off to the new school in order to get the plant. And I forget exactly why they don't just drive up and park and go out. Other than that's not a Magic School Bus episode, but I forget what is the impetus for them turning into a ladybug. Um, Somebody must say something along the lines of, but how are we going to learn how plants come about? And so they turn into a ladybug, um, and Phoebe, and they do this near the old school, and maybe it's Phoebe saying, no, because at this point Phoebe hasn't started saying we should get smaller so we can't be seen. But she tells Ms. Frizzle, I don't want the bus to turn into anything so that it looks crazy. And Ms. Frizzle says, a ladybug isn't a thing, it's an insect. And she turns the bus into a ladybug, and they start flying around the garden at the old school looking for Phoebe's plant. And they land on it, they crawl up it. They are upside down at one point, and you see Ralphie and Arnold going like this because they're, getting nauseous. And once again, I'm thinking, when it turned into a ladybug, it spun really, really fast, and that didn't make them sick, but they go upside down, and they're classically sick. And that was only one health thing with Arnold that I took a little bit of issue with. And Tim had drawn Phoebe's flower, I guess from her description, so that they could put a picture of it in place where it was going to be. And that is something I think that people do with gardens. They put pictures of the flowers where the flowers are going to eventually be. And Tim is apparently a very good artist. He drew something he drew a mussel or something in the, or he drew a rock in the beach episode. Phoebe is embarrassed, and her teacher is looking around as they are finding the plant, the flower from the garden eye view. The teacher's looking around from the human eye view, and Arnold does a version of his classic line. Phoebe's getting nervous. Arnold says, maybe you should have stayed home today. This is where they are in the flower, they're stuck in the nectar, and the giant bees come and they start sucking out the nectar. And the bus is stuck, so they're having trouble moving. The giant bee sounds a bit like Mothra, which I guess makes sense. The bus, so this is where they learned that flower petals are essentially runways to attract bees to land on them and suck out the nectar, and so the bus explodes with streamers that create more stripes on the flowers to attract more bees. The bees suck out the pollen, the bus can take off. But it doesn't go very far because, or sucks out the nectar. It doesn't go very far because they land right back on the same flower because they have to get a clone of that flower. In the meantime, we get another one of, Keisha's got a couple of catchphrases. One of them is, oh bad, oh bad, oh bad, bad, bad. But the other one is, let's get the facts, which is kind of a, summation of what we've learned so far for the benefit of the young viewers. They land on, I forget the name of the part of the flower in this case, but it's the part where all the pollen is. And Arnold has an allergic reaction to the pollen. And I don't think that would happen because the pollen is as big as Arnold's fist and therefore couldn't go up his nose. He could get a contact rash, potentially, if he's allergic to pollen, but I also don't think that that's how the pollen allergy works. But I'm not an expert on allergies, so if pollen the size of your fist would give you a sneezy allergic reaction, and this is not a clump of little regular-sized pollen, just one thing of pollen, one dust speck of pollen, but it's the size of your fist. If that would give you a sneezy allergic reaction, say so in the comments, and also give your credentials so that I know to take you seriously. He's still allergic when the pollen is then as big as the bus, because the bus has shrunk down to the size of a piece of pollen. And I don't think that's how allergies work. And I speak as someone who has an allergic reaction to pollen. So, let's see. When the bus shrinks down at Phoebe's behest, it is because Mr. Seedplot is right there. She doesn't want him to see anything that looks out of the ordinary. And as the ladybug bus shrinks to the size of pollen, he does see it shrink. And he says, I've discovered a new ladybug, the vanishing ladybug. It's going to be hard to prove. And then there's a play on Phoebe's line. At my old school, we never did something. I forget what exactly it is, but then somebody, I think it's Keisha, says, "We are at your old school," and so that's funny. Playing with that little catchphrase. We learn about pollination. Uh, they as now that the bus is pollen, it gets picked up by a bee's leg, flown to another flower, uh, dropped to the other flower, and then we learn about how the pollen pollinates. How it, uh, I guess, a tube, the pollen lands on the flower, and then part of it burrows into the flower so that it can create seeds. And they don't get too specific about how it creates the seeds. We just see the tube enter a seed, and the seed kind of grows, and it becomes the kind of seed that flies because it has it grows not quite. I guess this is another. It's a hybrid type of plant. So this is part of the plant that they made up that is similar to dandelion seeds, where they've got the little fluffy parts to make it easier for it to blow in the wind. And the bus catches. So they speed up the process so that the seed grows, gets carried away by the wind, leaves the flower, gets stuck on Mr. Seedplot's head as he's riding his bike from his school to the Magic School Bus school. Carlos is still in a hurry, and then he brushes it away just outside of, or just next to the students' garden, and once again they speed up time. They give it dirt, they give it water and sunlight, and they make it grow into a flower just as he's walking up with Phoebe's specific flower. And then Phoebe, who someone said, Carlos or somebody says, "Why would you be embarrassed by Ms. Frizzle? Look at what she's done. Look at what she can do. She's amazing." And so Phoebe introduces Ms. Frizzle. We find out that they know each other, and it also seems like Mr. Seedplot has a bit of a crush on Ms. Frizzle. In the post-show phone call bit, he seems to be about to write a letter to her and says that the name Valerie. So I guess that means her name is Valerie. So that's that episode. And pollination and the cycle of plant seeds, that's something that I think when this episode came about, that's covered a lot, I think, in early grade science classes. So I think this episode didn't really enlighten me in the way other episodes did. It just kind of reminded me of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So that's perhaps why it's a very nice looking episode, because it's about flowers and it's got the giant bees. But it's not one of those life-changing ones. Neither is Gets Ants in Its Pants. And at the time that I first saw this one, I had not read the second Animorphs book, where they morph into ants and have a very different experience of going into an ant colony. The episode does cover how ants smell each other to know whether or not they are in the right place with the right colony. And so when the Animorphs turn into ants that don't belong in the ant colony that they end up in, they get attacked and they get brutalized. And the only reason they don't die is because ant bodies are different than human bodies and can take more of the kind of abuse that they're taking. But and of course, they're not going to do that kind of thing. I was surprised they did it in a children's book. The Animorphs, as I have mentioned, the books are surprisingly violent for being for young kids, but they're not going to do it in the Magic School Bus episode. But they do brush up against it. So the gist of the episode is they're doing a science fair project about animal communities, and Keisha wants to direct a movie about ants. She guides an ant crawling along the floor into the classroom, prevents Liz from eating it, and says, "This is what our science fair project is going to be. We're going to make a movie about ants, specifically the ant that she follows in." But let's see, what did I write there? It gets, of course, more complicated because it's easy to lose an ant when you're not the size of an ant, and they follow the ant out but then they lose it among all the other ants outside near an anthill by a tree. Um, and of course, then they shrink down to the size of an ant. Or I don't know, the bus might not be the size of an ant, but the kids are smaller, so the bus is about the size of an ant. And we learn about how ants, communicate and all that stuff. And again, I don't sound very excited about this episode because it's not that Animorphs book, and it's not Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I guess the reason I'm not too excited about Gets Ants in Its Pants is because I know of better ant-related entertainments that I am more fond of. This takes third place. Still good, still educational, because the first thing we learn is we see that the ant that Keisha had brought into the classroom and then out into the wild, we are told that it is informing the other ants of Arnold's Mallow Blaster, which I don't know if that's a real treat, but in the Magic School Bus, it's kind of like an ice cream sandwich, but with fluff instead of ice cream. There's a later episode about marshmallows and how they create Mallow Blasters. That's in a season that I'm not going to get to, at least not this time around. But we've learned about how the ants communicate that there's this treat that we can eat. It's out there. And we learned that those are forager ants. So Keisha gets excited. We're going to go into the ant farm, or the ant colony, and we're going to film. We are small. We have a small camera. We're going to go film. Liz is the camera person. But they try to go into the ant farm, and they meet the guard ants, who don't, fortunately, tear them apart the way they would have torn apart the Animorphs. But they realize they can't get in unless the bus sprays them with ant pheromones for safety. And they are sprayed with the ant pheromones that smell like ants, and they go into the anthill, where there are ants going all over the place. But as the post-show caller says, there weren't enough ants, because ant colonies usually have thousands, as per the movie Ants or the movie A Bug's Life, and to which the producers respond, well, we could only hire so many extras in the budget, implying that the ants are actors just like the kids, or that there's some kind of cartoon motion capture going on. The guard ants let them pass. They go in the anthill. Arnold recognizes pieces of his Mallow Blaster, which means that in this time, ants have gone back into the classroom and started taking pieces of the Mallow Blaster and bringing them back. I think someone mentions, although I didn't see it, I was looking away from the screen, that an ant is carrying a chip. They don't really get into how ants can carry many, many times their weight, which is, I guess, maybe because of this. It's something that everybody knows about ants, but it's just a strange little detail, but maybe there wasn't a place for it in the script. Carlos is being the stage manager again. The ants are passing around a piece of the Mallow Blaster, which is a little disgusting for Arnold and the other kids. And then the ants carry humans somewhere. I forget why. They carry the humans to where the larvae are, the little squirming baby ants. And we learn about nurse ants and the larval stage, and then the pupal stage. And then we hear something about, I forget exactly what the context is, but another class, Mr. Cutt's class, made a film about something for the science fair last year, so that first evidence that there is another teacher and another class of students in that school. Keisha wants to learn more about the queen. So they learn that there's nurse ants, there's forager ants, there's guard ants, there's a queen ant, which she takes to be this glamorous thing. We'll make the movie about the queen ant. And then they, of course, find the queen ant and see that all she does is produce babies. She's giant, just sitting there producing babies. And in the meanwhile, it starts raining outside of the anthill and causes a cave-in. So we meet the builder ants and how they swarm to fix the hole in the tunnel. And so the lesson being all ants are the stars. The queen ant sounds the most glamorous, but she's really no more interesting than the foragers, the builders, the guards. All ants have a purpose. They are all the stars of the anthill. And then with this, I guess they've gotten enough footage over the course of the episode. They leave the anthill, but then they see a mudslide. And they use the magnifying glass that Keisha had been carrying and brought out to follow her ant to the anthill. They use the magnifying glass to deflect the mudslide from the anthill, which of course the ants themselves would not think to do. And I just wrote down that this is a nice contrast with the way in movies kids are usually seen to be using magnifying glasses with ants, which is to burn them. So that's I like that. So the post-show call, we see that Liz is trying to get, at the very end of the episode, the kids go one by one thanking each other for their help doing the thing, and nobody thanks Liz, who was holding the camera the whole time. So in the post-show, Liz is trying to get due credit, and both producer characters that we've encountered throughout the season are there for the post-show. And one of them even says, yes, I'm the producer of the show, and then the other one rolls up in the other office chair and he says, well, I'm one of the producers of the show. We find out that the person calling counted the ants in the episode, which is how they know to say there are too few ants. And says that I guess they didn't make enough of a deal of how most ants are female. Not the most interesting thing. So that's that episode, and there is only one more episode in Season 1, and Season 1 is the only season I currently have access to, and I do not have any specific memory of this episode. Doesn't mean I haven't seen it, and I won't recognize it when I watch it, but it's called Kicks Up a Storm. It's about weather, but I'm pretty sure it's not the Cycle of Water episode where they go through how water is purified on the way to the sink. I don't think it's that episode, but maybe I will recognize it. It says that Ralphie creates a thunderstorm, and I recall the episode where one of them creates an island from a volcano. In fact, it looks like that's the very next episode, first episode of Season 2. But I don't remember Kicks Up a Storm. But again, we'll see if I recognize it. We'll see what I write down about it. We'll see what I say about it. Seatbelts, everyone.